So recently, Ruben Amorim's been sacked, and we have officially confirmed the appointment of Michael Carrick. Obviously, you all know how I feel about that, or well, at least 51 of you do, because 51 views from my last video. If you want to know how I feel about that appointment, and why I'm actually pretty disappointed with it, you can go look at that video. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today. Today, what we're going to be talking about is our next permanent manager. And so what the club is planning to do is we're going to have Carrick as an interim until the end of the season, and then going into 26-27, we're going to find a new permanent manager who's supposedly supposed to be an elite manager to take us to the next level and hopefully bring the club back to where we want it to be. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to be ranking a bunch of different names that could potentially be available and we could potentially pursue for the permanent manager job. I've tried to include as many names as I possibly can. If you notice anyone who isn't on the list and you think should be included or ranked, please comment down below. If you are interested in hearing my opinion on that, I'd be sure to respond. And yeah, let's just get straight underway. So the first manager we're going to be talking about is Ruben Amorim. And you guys are probably wondering, what's Ruben Amorim doing here? We just sacked him. What I'm going to start by talking about before we talk about all these other permanent manager options is how I would have ranked the option to have kept Ruben Amorim until the end of the season and then go into 26-27, giving him another year to sort of get his system across. In terms of my opinion on Ruben Amorim, I think there's definitely positives to him. I don't agree with this idea that he's a horrible manager. I know in terms of actual success, it was probably the worst reign um, of any manager in the club. But I think that there's definitely was potential in terms of what he achieved at Sporting and the stuff we were seeing this season. I do think that what we hear about, him having the third most goals in the league is a bit overstated because a lot of those goals are set pieces. A lot of those goals are coming from counterattacks or just aren't really goals that I think were, from good, honest like play from breaking down teams. And one of my biggest faults with Amber was actually that we were never able to really get good attacking play going through the center. Now, the response to that is, well, we didn't have enough players. But for me, I think if you're getting a striker and you're getting two number 10s, and you also are choosing to keep Bruno, that's four central players that either you chose or you chose to keep. And so I really thought Ruben Amorim should have been able to implement more of his system going into this season in terms of how we play on the ball. I think there's definitely been improvements, especially off the ball. I think our pressing has been fantastic throughout the entire season. But for me, ultimately, it was a little bit underwhelming. I think his biggest, the moment where for me I said I think it's done was actually when he went to the back four against Newcastle. Because after he went to the back four against Newcastle, I saw the very next game against Wolves, as soon as he went to the back three, all the players started downing tools. The passes were too slow. There was no good play to try and break teams down and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's for me when I started to think, okay, his time's running out. And ultimately, it ended up ending, quicker than any of us thought it would. Like a week later from the Wolves game, I believe. If it were up to me, I would have given him the rest of the season. But based on what I was seeing from that Wolves game, I don't think he would have been successful had he continued to stick with the 3-4-3 throughout the season. I think he had to go to a back four. And he sort of backed himself into that corner. I don't think it's a good thing that he had to go to the back four, that the players are just downing tools. And maybe if you get to the summer, then you can get some more players and try to start implementing your own system. But what people oftentimes forget is that we had something similar with Ten Hag, where he was trying to, implement this counter-attacking system and then transition into his own system throughout the seasons that went by. But because he set such high standards early on, and also because it was taking time and we sort of looked like we were lacking a style of play in his second and third season, that's sort of what got a lot of the fan base against Ten Hag. So all that is to say, in terms of where I would rank Amorim, I would put him in interested, but I would have been interested based on what he did at Sporting and some of the progress we were seeing in this season. But I would have had to see more in the second half of the season. So maybe that would be better attacking play and a better ability to break down low blocks. I think if we had seen signs of that more, not like every single game, but a little bit more consistently than just, I think Brighton was the only game where I genuinely thought we were good at breaking down a team. If I could see more of that throughout the season, then I would have probably been interested in giving Amorim the next season as well. If we didn't see that, then I would have probably been more opposed to it. But this is where I would have put him. I was interested, but um, I guess it didn't ultimately work out. And I'm just starting to realize now I should probably go through these tiers actually before we keep going through. So yes, please is going to be managers who I would absolutely love at the club. I think they would be perfect. Elite managers would be managers who I think are elite, who aren't my first choice, but I would still be very happy if they came in. Interested but is managers who I think definitely have a lot of promise, but there's maybe one or two things which I'm a little bit concerned about. With an interview would be managers who I don't think they should be hired, but I'm not completely opposed to it if they get an interview, if they do something which really makes them stand out in the second half of the season, maybe, and then would not hire. It's just no way I'm going for this guy. So with that said, let's go to Ancelotti. In terms of Ancelotti, I think I would put him in interested but as well. The reason why I would put him in interested but is I think he's definitely a top manager, but I don't know whether he's a top manager for what we need right now. What we need right now is number one, we need a much stronger tactical identity, and ability to get players to understand how to break down low blocks or understand how to have some more tactical, I guess, ability to do things on the pitch. And we also need someone who's going to be here around to like build a project and be willing to make the ruthless decisions of getting rid of certain players, signing the right players, and sort of building around the system. And I think with Ancelotti, you have a manager who, number one, isn't the most tactically adept, but number two is also a manager who definitely thrives more when you're giving him elite players who he needs to satisfy the egos of. The problem we have at United right now is we have players with a lot of ego, but I don't think the quality is there where you can bring in someone like Ancelotti and then just let the players do whatever they want, and then they're going to be able to be successful. I've already seen the intensity dropping when the heads drop. Sometimes the players downing tools even during this season with someone that they like, and I don't think Ancelotti is the kind of authoritarian that we need to be able to thrive going forward. And so Ancelotti is definitely someone I think can still be a top manager. I don't know if he has to leave Brazil, honestly, but if he wants to leave for a club job, I think he could definitely, do a job at a team which has a lot of really good superstars. But I just don't think that's United. Next, we have Carrick. Carrick was appointed interim manager, and for me, at the moment I wouldn't hire him. And obviously, if he goes on this incredible run of games where he gets us playing incredibly brilliant football, maybe that can move up to worth an interview or even interested. But for me, the issue I have with Michael Carrick is just that he's so unproven at the top level. And his only experience is going to Middlesbrough, and even at Middlesbrough, like his first season was good, but in his second and third season, he underperformed with the players he had. He got sacked not because of like one game or one bad run of form, but because of 2 seasons of underperformance. And now that he's left, Middlesbrough are doing very well in the championship. So I think that's already a huge red flag against Carrick. He also doesn't have a lot of experience. I don't think he's tactically that rigid or strong. He's not as good as in press conferences as I would want. Ultimately, I think Carrick can be a good manager. There's nothing apart from that one Middlesbrough job that's suggesting he cannot be a good manager. But at this point in his career, I don't think it's the right time, to be honest, even for him as an interim. So what does that say about him as a permanent manager? For me, he's not for me. Next, we have Conte. And I really like Conte and what he's done with Napoli and what he's sort of done at Chelsea. He's obviously Premier League proven. He's a serial winner. But for me, I would have to also put him in interested but. The reason why I put Conte in interested but is nothing to do with his tactics. Because I think tactically, he's actually a pretty high quality manager. He's not that stuck to his 3-4-3. He was able to change the way he was playing at Napoli. I also think he's a good man manager, and he's definitely fantastic at raising the floor. And I think right now, Man United could really use a manager that can raise the floor as we're coming off of seasons where we're 12th based on expected points, I believe, 15th based on expected points. This season, if Carrick doesn't do a good job, could end up with us not finishing in Europe again. Someone who can raise the floor is definitely someone who I think could be really, important for us. But my main problem with Conte is that he's definitely someone who wants more control, and he's someone who has falling outs with boards and owners if he doesn't get what he wants. And I think with this structure, especially with Wilcox, to be honest, I don't rate him at all. I don't think he's definitely not qualified for this job. Was he like a sporting director at Southampton where they had some horrible season and got relegated? Besides that, he's only been the technical director. I don't think Conte would be interested in working with Wilcox or the team at United where everything is like the manager's just a coach and we have this board structure that decides everything. I think if we can back him properly and we can really push to get really good players, I might put him in elite manager if we're able to have 200 million net spend next summer and we can get in players and maybe even challenge for a league. And I know that sounds like an exaggeration, but Chelsea finished 10th and bring this guy in and they're challenging for a league. I think Conte has that skill level, and we have players like Mbeumo, Ama, Bruno. I know it sounds crazy, but I think Conte is the kind of manager that can take a team even as low as United and make them challenge for a league with the right amount of backing and signings. But I ultimately think this is going to be a project, and for me, I don't think Conte is the right project manager for us. So next we have De Zerbi. De Zerbi, I'm going to put as our first elite manager entry. The reason why I'm putting De Zerbi at elite manager is that I think number one, he's definitely tactically proven. He has, in my opinion, some of the most exciting attacking football, and he's got this unique tactical identity, which I think is a huge plus. I definitely want a manager at United where it feels like a new tactical ideology, or we have a clearly defined identity. Because at least in my lifetime, you look at the teams of the past who have been successful in this league, and you have Klopp, who has a clear identity that's unique to everyone, and you have Pep, who had a clear identity that was unique to everyone. I would like a De Zerbi where we can have a unique tactical ideology under him. I think he's also good at developing players. He was obviously working at Brighton. He's now at Marseille, where he's also, I think, still doing a pretty good job. Um, and I think he definitely has the charisma to be able to do well in a job like this. I would be worried about his potential ability to work with a upper staff and potential falling outs. But I think that unlike Conte, De Zerbi might be more open to it, given he worked at Brighton, where they have probably similar structures to, like having a scout, a sporting director who's deciding on signings. I don't think De Zerbi was the one deciding on all of the signings at Brighton. So he might be more willing to come and work at United. And I can definitely see him being more of a project manager compared to Conte, who for me feels more like a, just now success. And so even though they might both have fiery personalities, I would go with De Zerbi just because I think he could have the more potential to work out and also more potential to build a long-term project. But I'm definitely happy with De Zerbi. Next, we have Emery. With Emery, I think it has to be interested but as well. And the reason why I put Emery at interested but is because what he's doing at Newcastle, or sorry, not Newcastle, what he's doing at Villa is fantastic. The way he's taken them with not a lot of money and brought them to the top, not to the top, but into, at some point being in a title race, consistent top four finishes from a relegation zone, is, I think, very good management and is very good work. And he's definitely done a lot to rebuild his managerial career working at Villa. I also think he's definitely a good cup manager. It's not a fluke that he won the Europa League as many times as he did, actually even winning it over us in 2021. So I think that could also be a benefit. Obviously, with United, whilst we're in this rebuilding process, we don't want to have another thing like with Ole and Mourinho's last season, where it's 6 years without a trophy, and then there's so much pressure that we sack a manager who might have been good for a project because we don't get trophies. Winning trophies is important, so I would say Emery definitely ticks that. My main issues with Emery, though, is number one, I don't know if his tactical ideology can be implemented at a team like United, where I feel like it's a lot more sit back, counter attack, that sort of stuff, is what he's seen like, and how he sort of plays. And if you look at the XG of Aston Villa right now, even in this a fantastic run of form, they're definitely overperforming because of players like Rodgers. And so that's a huge red flag for me that I'm a little bit concerned about. And then the other thing that really concerns me is his track record at big clubs. I think some managers are just managers who do well at these smaller clubs like Aston Villa. But then you look at what he did at PSG, you look at how Arsenal went and how that went up in flames. I don't know if Emery is the right profile for a club like United, and I think going into next season where we can't afford to have another situation where, we stop bringing a manager and it just goes into flames completely, I would be a little apprehensive to bringing in Emery. Luis Enrique is obviously going to be our first yes please manager. If you just look at Enrique, he ticks every single box. Achievements and trophies, check. Treble winner 2 times. The only other manager to do that is Pep. So he has the achievements. Ability to manage big egos, check. You see how he was at Barca, able to win the treble over there, despite potential issues with Messi and fallings out he had. He was still able to get that team working to a good degree. Ability to build projects is also a huge check. In terms of what he's been able to do with this PSG team and sort of get rid of the superstar model and transform them into maybe one of the best teams in the entire league. His style of play and tactics are check. He's a fantastic tactical manager. He has great attacking play. I think he would be perfect at United. In terms of his reputation and pedigree, that's also a check. I think if he came in, players would respect him, the media would respect him. I think it's unlikely that you would have as much criticism towards his system or tactics as you do with, a manager that's young like Amorim, who's coming from like the Sporting. And for me, all of that is just definitely a clear yes that Luis Enrique needs to be number one over here. Next, we have Cesc Fabregas. And for me, Fabregas is going to go into would not hire as well. And the reason why I wouldn't hire Cesc Fabregas, and I'll actually put Farioli over here as well with him. I think they can go together, is because I just don't think they have enough experience. And maybe that would have been fine after we sacked Ten Hag, but I think after what happened with Amorim, there's going to be so much concern if we go for another inexperienced manager. So that's going to come from the fans. It's going to come from the players. It's going to come from the media. And the second thing is look like they're going badly. It's going to be like, oh, Amorim finished 15th. Oh, Amorim couldn't get the job done. Amorim fell out with the board. And that kind of pressure is going to be all over these young managers who have sort of been building their names on the continent. And I look at what they did, and I'm not that impressed by any of it. You look at Fabregas, and he had Como playing good attacking football, but Como finished, I think, 10th. They're in 5th right now. Thiago Motta, I believe, or was it Thiago Motta? It was some Thiago. At Bologna had something very similar to what he did, and then went to Juventus and got sacked in like March or May and failed at a big club. And you have Farioli, who's been doing well, but he's been doing well at Nice, Ajax, and then Porto right now. Even though he's doing very well right now, I think for managers like these, I need to see more from them before I can trust them at a club that's as elite as United. They need to make that next step to a different club first. So maybe that's a bigger club in Europe. Maybe that's another Premier League club, like the way Emery or Howe are at Newcastle and Aston Villa, respectively, right now, and do something like they're doing. Then I can maybe trust them to come into United. But I don't want to go for another really young, inexperienced manager because not necessarily that I don't believe it can work. There's maybe potential for Farioli or Fabregas to work, but I think it would just be such a nightmare in the media, a nightmare amongst the fans if we brought in another young manager because the pitchforks would be out on day one. So that's why I have those two out and would not hire. With Glasner, he's going to be my first worth an interview shout. The reason why I would have Glasner and worth it, and actually, he did just lose to Macclesfield in the FA Cup. Yeah, he's going and would not hire. Um, my problem with Glasner is I think he's definitely a decent coach. He has tactical flexibility, and his ability to win trophies is definitely a positive. But I see too many red flags, which I'm concerned about. The first red flag I'm concerned about is number one, they're like in what 13th, 14th, so I think it's a little bit overhyped what he's doing at Crystal Palace. Number two, his tactics are really defensive oriented. Back three, transition play, low possession. I don't think that can transfer well to a big club like United. And number three, I think he's never managed at a big club before, so it would definitely be a huge step up. For me, it screams of the kind of appointment that would be like a David Moyes back in 2013 or 2013-14. And if you look back at what David Moyes was achieving, Glasner is achieving less, and he has a lot of the similar flaws that Moyes did, which makes me think it would not be successful if we brought him in. So that's why I would steer clear of Glasner. Next, we have Hoiber. I really don't know how to pronounce his name that well. Actually, I can look it up right now. Honeb. Yeah, Honeb. Sorry about that. So Sebastian Honeb. And I would put him in worth an interview. And I know that that's might be, Fabregas and Farioli, why are they and would not hire, and this guy, Honeb, isn't worth an interview. The reason I would put him in worth an interview is I just feel like he has a little bit more pedigree compared to these two. Whereas with Fabregas, it's he's in a top five league, but it's 10th and 5th. And then with Farioli, he hasn't done it in a top five league that consistently. I think I rate the Bundesliga a little bit more than those other leagues. And so with Honem being able to be successful in that league, I would maybe trust him a little bit more to come in. And maybe it would be less inexperienced compared to Amorim. But I would still not be that interested in him. He wouldn't be one of my top options because of the same problems with youthfulness, not that much experience at the elite level. But I would still put him a little bit over Fabregas and Farioli. The next one I'm going to be ranking is Eddie Howe. And Eddie Howe is actually going to be going into elite manager as well. The reason why I would put Howe in elite manager is because I I mean, a lot of the similar reasons why you would have Emery as someone you would be considering between these two. Number one, what he was able to do with Newcastle and transform them into from a relegation battling team into a team which was regularly contending for Champions League spaces, regularly contending for Europe qualification, all that sort of stuff. That's number one. I think his man management definitely seems promising. Tactically, I think he's pretty good. Um, the reason why I have Howe an elite manager compared to Emery is number one. I think Howe's success is a little bit more sustainable than Emery's, whereas Emery, I think it's definitely a lot more transition play, a lot more low XG, low possession. I think with Howe, it's a little bit more of the mold of a big club, even though it's not that perfect. And then number two, I think Howe has more potential to play more attacking minded football. And I look at what he did with Bournemouth in the Premier League, where they were definitely one of the darlings of the Premier League and how they were attacking and how they had such fantastic build up play and attacking football and all that sort of stuff. And he kept Bournemouth in the Premier League for a long time playing like that. And I think defensively he's definitely improved since he's come in as Newcastle manager. I think at Man United it would be a question of whether or not he can combine his tactical attacking ideologies that maybe came from his time at Bournemouth and his more defensive ideologies that came from his time as Man United manager. But I do trust that he can do that. I think he's a really top quality coach. So he wouldn't be one of my top three over here in Yes Please. But I do still think he's an elite manager, and he has maybe more potential to succeed and succeed in the long term as well than any of these other four that are in interested. But with Hürzeler, I would also put him would not hire, and that's just because of how inexperienced he is. You look at what Hürzeler's achieved at Brighton; it's a top eight finish, which is good, and then now they're sort of in 11th ish, competing for those European spots. He's just an average Premier League manager. I think he has an average Premier League team, and he's doing average things with it. He hasn't won any trophies. The football is all right. I just don't think he's the caliber of manager that United should be going for, and he needs to make a step up first before we go for someone like him. Iraola, I would also put would not hire. And honestly, I don't buy all the hype with Iraola. Um, I mean, you can say, "Oh, it's Bournemouth. Bournemouth's not a good team," but Bournemouth have good recruitment. They have good players. Adams is someone I think is a good player. I think Semenyo was a decent player, or not decent. Semenyo is obviously a great player. I really rate Creepy Junior. Trifford's probably an upgrade on Kirkes. And Areola, the fall off that we've seen to be in 15th and honestly nowhere near European places, let alone the fact that last season wasn't even that impressive. I think they finished ninth, didn't win anything. And there's this sort of narrative, I think, going around about Areola that, oh, but his attacking football is more transferable to the rest of, these elite teams. But honestly, I just don't buy it with him. His football is really transition heavy. And okay, his is more pressing and Glasner's is more, sitting back. But with Emery, we already had someone who is really good at pressing. And the problem was that we couldn't break down low blocks. And so with Areola, we would get a good pressing manager, but we already had that with Emery, and we weren't happy because we couldn't build up past low blocks and break teams down. And a lot of times, the teams we were expecting to beat were the ones sitting back against us and not trying to build up from the back. And so that really concerns me with Areola. I don't think he has good attacking pedigree in terms of actually breaking down teams. And so I also would try to steer clear of him. I don't think any of these three are managers that we should be really going for if we're ambitious about, being as big as we want to be or being as successful. I feel like if we go for one of, Glasner, Hürzeler, Areola, and we'll talk about Silva when he comes up, we're getting a manager who's a mid-table manager to try and get us out of mid-table. And I just don't think that seems that logical to me. With Maresca, I think he's worth an interview. I'm not that big on Maresca, honestly. I think there's definitely positives. He is a fantastic big game manager tactically. He was able to win trophies, which is largely comes from his ability to manage big games. And so you would have a trophy winner. You would have someone who, can manage well in big games. He's definitely good at having a firm grip or firm fist in terms of how he manages teams to stop player power from happening. He won't take any trash from anyone. Those are all positives. But I think you have to keep in mind, we've been really anti-Amorim, I think, as a fan base, where we think, oh, Amorim hasn't been good enough. Amorim, it's too poor what the results are. With Maresca, I'm pretty sure we were like 2 points behind him, and for a large time we were equal on points with Maresca when all this sort of talk was going around about sack Amorim, sack Maresca, all that sort of stuff. And you have to keep in mind, Maresca gets a lot of results in big games, and Amorim doesn't get as many results. He gets some results in big games, but he lost to Arsenal, he lost to City. He lost to Arsenal, he lost to City. He drew to Spurs, he lost to Villa. And with Maresca, you have a manager who's constantly picking up big game results from what I understand of him. So what does that say about how he's doing against smaller teams? And I look at the squads that Amorim and Maresca were doing relatively comparable jobs with. And with Amorim, I mean, we have Bruno, we had Mbeumo, but his form was drying up. Um, and I think that's really it in terms of elite quality players. Maybe Ahmad as well. In terms of the elite players we have, but with Chelsea, you have Palmer, who I know has been out, but still, you have Palmer. You have Caicedo, who's an elite DM, and you have Cucurella, who's probably one of the best left backs in the world. You have James, who's probably one of the best right backs or even DMs in the world. Um, I just think that Maresca for me is too unambitious. For me, if we get Maresca, then why did we sack Amorim, basically? Especially because Maresca's also fallen out with the board that he was working with. So it feels like we're replacing one project manager with a project manager of similar value and quality who's actually achieved less in his career than Amorim. And we're going to be restarting our project to just sort of move sideways. McKenna, I would have him in. I don't want to pollute would not hire too much. So I'm going to put McKenna in worth an interview. And you might be saying, how can I put McKenna worth an interview when I have Glasner, Hürzeler, Iraola, Fabregas, and Ferrioli all down here? Which, now that I say that out loud, yeah, McKenna's going to have to go there. I think it's a similar issue. Not so much like I think he's definitely a better quality manager than Michael Carrick. But it's a similar issue to him in that he was successful at Ipswich. He had 2 very good seasons in League One and the Championship, getting promoted twice. Then he got relegated in the Premier League. I went into this season with a team that we considered to be one of the strongest in the Championship, and he is nowhere near the title. I think they're maybe 6 points off, 7 points off. Not keeping up too much with the Championship these days. I think they're in third right now. Maybe they're in second at the time of recording this. Which is okay, not perfect, or not even like average, I guess. For a team which you would have expected to be winning the league, maybe slightly below average. He has good attacking football and good attacking structures. But for me, it's a similar issue with all of these other managers in that they haven't had a top job. We don't know what it would look like for them at a top job. Even though I think maybe somewhat controversially, McKenna has more potential to do well in a top job than any of these three. He needs to go to another club first before he makes a step up to Man United. I think maybe a Spurs would be good for him. Maybe when one of these three leaves, like when Glasner leaves, or when Hürzeler probably isn't leaving, or when Iraola leaves, those are the kinds of clubs that he should be making a step up to. And then maybe at that point we can consider bringing him back to manage the first team. But I think at the moment right now it's too early for him to come to a club like United. With Nagelsmann, I'm gonna put him as my second yes, please. I think Nagelsmann is a great manager. And he is a young manager, but he's a young manager who's achieved a lot. I imagine he's going to, in the 2026 World Cup, get Germany out of the group and probably have a good run with them. They have, I think, enough decent players to do well. And so he's going to be coming off of the back of the 2026 World Cup, where I predict he's going to be the person who returns Germany to a sort of respectable state after 2 really poor World Cup performances. He has his Bayern time, which I know a lot of people say was a failure and wasn't good enough. He was still doing pretty well at Bayern. I think he had a pretty high win percentage. I don't remember if he got sacked before he could win a title, but he definitely was doing okay at Bayern. He was doing very well at Leipzig. In terms of what I like about him in his qualities, I think he has very good tactical ideologies. He is also very, I think, a lot more free is not a lot more flexible in the tactical systems he uses. He can use a 4-2-3-1, 3-2-5, and the shapes shift. And I think compared to these other young managers, he's a manager who would get respect when he comes to a club like United from the media. So I feel like he would be definitely a good option for us to build a project around. My only concern is maybe he wasn't able to manage the egos at a team like Bayern. I feel like at a club like United, the egos probably aren't as big as at a team like Bayern because we just don't have as many superstars at them as them. And I think he could definitely be a good option. Think of it like this, right? If I could have 2 seasons where I'm not going to sack a manager no matter what, and I'm going to build a project, and I want to in that third season maybe challenge for a league title, for example. Out of every single manager on this list, um, Nagelsmann would be my option. I think he would be the best suited to do something like that. In terms of building that project, he seems for me like a very promising manager. Well, him and Enrique, I guess. He's a very promising manager, and I would love to have him at United. With Solskjaer, if you've seen my last video, I think this is less surprising to you. But I'm actually going to put him in elite manager for what we need. And you might be thinking, really, only elite manager? How does that work? We shouldn't be doing that, all that sort of stuff. But I just think I look at all the boxes he ticks, and he actually is a really good fit for us. Number one, he's good at working with a difficult board. He worked with the Glazers already, so how much harder can it get? So I think he would be fine working with Vivell, working with Wilcox, and maybe even or whichever new sporting director comes if we get a new one. I don't think that's going to be an issue, and he's definitely someone who's going to be willing to be more of a coach, even if he has less say, especially because of his love for the club. I look at big game management in terms of what we're saying about, Maresca is a big game manager. Oli, I think, was one of the only teams in 1920 before the Watford game to take points off of that machine of a team that Jurgen Klopp built. He was, dog walking Pep, I think, some seasons. There was like one season where he won 3 out of 4 games against Pep. So big game, he's very good. I think he's very tactically flexible as well. The way we say about maybe some of these managers, but are they too tactically rigid? With Oli, I think we saw definitely a lot of different tactical ideologies throughout his time, whether that was in his caretaker spell, then in 1920, then in 2021, where we sort of went from 1920 having Matic and Pogba in the midfield and having more attacking play coming down the center, to having to shift to having McTominay and Fred and still maintaining a very respectable level and making progress. Whether that is player management and getting players to be willing to fight for him, whether that was during his caretaker spell when he got a very hugely toxic dressing room back on track, whether that was in his first months as a United manager in 1920 when things looked like they were going against him and he needed to get good results against Spurs and City, and he got those results and got the players on side and managed to build a very respectable project for himself. And I think it just ticks so many boxes where I feel like if we bring Solskjaer back, I'm not worried that the same way I'd be worried about any of these managers that is, we're going to end up eighth or it's going to fail. Like if we bring in Glasner, I would be worried it would fail. If we bring in Fabregas, I would be worried it would fail. And even with managers like Maresca or Conte, if we brought them in, maybe I would be a little bit more secure in the tactical setup, less so under Conte or less so under Maresca, but I'd be worried it might blow up and the project would just get destroyed by falling outs. I think Ole's just a much more stable character than all of these guys. The only criticism, or the main criticism I hear about Ole is that we can't go back to the past when the past wasn't successful. But the past was finishing third and finishing second and making forward progress to the point where we were in a title race in 2021. I think that's a very respectable place to be, especially after full seasons, considering the transfer windows that he was getting with, I think one window in 2021, we got Tejas, Van de Beek, and Cavani. So a free agent striker, a backup left back who wasn't at the level, and a midfielder who played in Bruno's position who wasn't of use to the team. So I think given what he was been able to achieve, he just gives a floor and stability, which I think would be really helpful for us in this time where we finished 12th, 15th, and could also do bad in this season as well. I personally think he has the potential to build a very successful project, but that's probably a topic for another video. I just think because at the very least he can raise the floor, I would have him in an elite manager that I would want at the club. Because I think, as we have more debt that we have to take on, as we, maybe have more players leaving, especially with Bruno leaving, I think just having someone who can be there to make sure there's a hard floor that we don't fall under and we can keep getting top four and maybe make small progress towards building a title winning team, even if he can't be the guy to get us over the edge. I would really love to have Solskjaer back in the team. With Pochettino, for me, it's between interested but or worth an interview. And I'm actually going to put him in worth an interview. I think if this was Pochettino after Spurs, I would have taken him. I think even if this was Pochettino after 2021, I would have taken him when we chose to get Ten Hag, or not 2021, and after 21-22, when we chose to get Ten Hag, maybe I would have taken Pochettino then too. But I think just too much has happened in his career, which is sort of made me question whether we should be going for someone like him. Number one is obviously the lack of trophies. Which I don't think is as big of a deal as being able to build a project. So in 18-19, I was more willing to look past that, or 19-20, I was more willing to look past that issue of not winning trophies. But the bigger problem for me is just that he struggles to deal with board structures like the one we have at United, the way things sort of ended at Chelsea, and I think a lot of his stock is sort of falling out. Insofar as him being an elite manager, his time at the U.S. hasn't been that successful. His time at Chelsea, was okay, but Maresca, who I also don't rate, he's in the same tier as him, took that team and took them to sixth. So he was able to elevate the levels of Poch, and I don't particularly rate him as a manager. So what does that say about Poch's level when he came to Chelsea? You look at what he did at PSG. PSG didn't end well. Spurs, the way it all ended after that Champions League final, I think his stock has just gone down too much. It reminds me a bit of a Jose Mourinho kind of, where he's sort of on the decline, and then we went for him, and then we got a declined version. We didn't get that elite manager that we were hoping for. I feel like if we bring in Pochettino, it would be a similar mistake to that. With Marco Silva, he's going to go in this tier as well. By the way, I haven't ordered any of it. I'll maybe order it at the end. Marco Silva is the manager I would go for next, or in would not hire. With Marco Silva, it's just same issues as all these other guys, right? It's just he wasn't able to translate it at Everton, or sorry, at Fulham. Or sorry, he has good results at Fulham, but I don't think he can transfer it to an elite level team. And ultimately, I just think that we can't go for a manager who's a mid-table manager or survives relegation manager, or he's doing good with a low-quality team manager. He can maybe make this step up to a slightly bigger team in the Premier League, maybe go into Europe. I don't think United is the right step for him. With Southgate, I'm actually going to put him in worth an interview. And I know that's a bit surprising. Ooh. Actually, there were those comments he made just today about how the sort of sporting director structure is getting managers giving them less power. So I don't think he's that interested in working in a structure like that. But I mean, for the United job, maybe he'd be willing to make an exception. Yeah, we're gonna go worth an interview. Southgate, let's get something out of the way. Tactically, not that strong. I think if you compare him to an Enrique or a Nagelsmann or a Zerbi or even a Conte, even a Maresca, tactically he's not that solid. He is a couple of things though. Number one, he's very decent at developing young players and developing a good quality team. He's number two, very good at having a good culture within the team and developing good culture there. Number three, he's very good at raising the floor to the extent that he isn't going to lose games. And for me, I think that that's okay. Because I feel like we can bring in Southgate. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I don't think with Southgate, we're at as much of a risk of everything going wrong as we are with a Fabregas or a Ferrioli or even any of these Premier League proven managers. I think he's definitely going to be good at maintaining good PR, which I think is important given how toxic it can get sometimes at United. He's a level head who can sort of keep things calm and sort of keep the levels at a solid top four, maybe your top six or even top eight. I feel like with Southgate, there's definitely a ceiling on how high we can go, but I think at the moment, given how bad we're doing and how unstable it's likely going to be going into next season, we might not even have Europe. I don't think we'll get Europe next season, which maybe I'll talk about in a different video, predicting the rest of the league. I think Southgate can just raise the floor, and for me, that's why I would put him in worth an interview over any of these guys, because I'm not confident that any of these guys will raise the floor. Next, I have Tuchel. And with Tuchel and this other guy, who's actually right next to him, so we'll talk about them, I guess, together. One of them is going into elite manager, and one of them is going into yes, please. For me, I'm a little bit torn on who to go for. But I think I'll lean slightly towards Xabi. And then I'll put Tuchel over here. Oh, well, let's talk about them individually first. I think Tuchel is an incredible manager, and Xavi is too. Tuchel, obviously, what he did at Chelsea, winning the Champions League, what he's done at Dortmund, what he's done a lot of times throughout his career. I think he's very good at also again raising the floor of a team, getting them to perform respectably, um, and sort of getting I think maybe not as high quality players performing to a good quality. I also think that he is definitely volatile. I'd say similar to the Zerbi levels of volatility. I don't think he's as volatile as Conte, so I wouldn't be that concerned that it blows up immediately or it blows up like out of nowhere. Um, Maybe it'll go wrong with his relationship with the board. 2 or 3 years in, but I don't think it'll blow up. So I definitely think he's someone who can raise the floor and help us be successful in the short term. And that's why I would put him in elite manager because of his Premier League experience, because of his achievements and all that sort of stuff. With Xabi, it's not Premier League proven, but what he did at Leverkusen is just unbelievable. And I keep saying this, and the reason why I have these three in the top three and maybe a Tuchel below them is because one of the most important things for me is I want a United team where I can just understand their tactical identity and where we can go to the games and we can be the protagonist and we know this is how we're going to play and we're going to exert our will onto opponents. And here we have three very elite managers who have very strong tactical ideologies that make them unique. I think Xabi Alonso, the things he was doing at Leverkusen are incredible. And obviously, he struggled at Real Madrid, what he was doing there. But Madrid is just such a different universe of job compared to every other job in the entire world. Because it's not just pressure; it's also the fact that you're expected not to be a good tactician. Your job is to cater to the players. And I don't think Xavi is the kind of manager who caters to players. He's the kind of manager who's an elite tactician. So I would love to have Xavi be that elite tactician and be given time to develop a project. Um, and I think based on what he's achieved at Leverkusen, I would put him up here and yes, please. The reason I would have him below Nagelsmann, but Nagelsmann did get sacked by Bayern. I would put him above Nagelsmann just because what he achieved in that season with Leverkusen, going undefeated in the league, beating Bayern to the title, is just phenomenal stuff. Um, that's why I would have Xabi and yes, please. And then Tuchel, an elite manager. Xavi's top manager, great at developing good teams, great at raising the floor. I think people forget Leverkusen were like hovering around relegation, lower mid-table when he came in, took them to the top league title as an unbeaten manager. And I think if we give him the right resources, he's definitely the kind of manager I would love to build a project around. And I can see any of these three, if we bring them in and we back them properly, can be successful and actually bring us to a title race in 3 to 4 years. Whereas with these guys, I think maybe the Zerbi is an exception. Although I'm less confident with him than these three. But with Tuchel, Howe, or Oli, it would be like we can raise the floor. Maybe we can win some cups. Maybe with Tuchel, which is why I have him first over here, we can win maybe a European Cup. Maybe even the Champions League. I mean, we're saying it sounds crazy, but you see what he did at Chelsea. Um, I would be less convinced about any of these guys with a long-term project to take us to like a regular title contender or to the levels of Arsenal or City right now, though. That's why I have these three in top three as yes, please. Then we have Xavi. With Xavi, I'm going to put him interested, but um, there's a lot of things to like about Xavi. Number one, he has experience working with really bad boards and toxic boards based on what he did at Barca. Number two, he's a very good tactically astute manager. He has a clear style of play, which I would love to see him implement. He also, United is his club. I think he'd be more willing to work along with the board, given his experience working with poorer boards and maybe not getting all the players he wanted. I love his prior experience of developing youth players from Barca. That's something that we've sort of been neglecting, especially under Amorim, and we definitely need to see a return. And so those are all the positives with me for Xavi. What I would be a little bit concerned about with Xavi is I think that you look at the way Hansi Flick elevated the Barca team that he had, and it makes me wonder, he's good at raising the floor, but is he the kind of manager who can take us to the top? Which, actually, to be fair, is the case with a lot of these guys. I think the difference between him and a lot of these guys, though, which I feel like are immediate floor raisers, is that he's never done it in the Premier League. And so with him compared to Tuchel, De Zerbi, Howe, or even an Oli, is the risk that, his style of play just isn't transferable to the Prem and he'll need to learn it. And then it might not be as stable as we want to do with these guys. He's definitely a manager I'm interested in, but is he a manager who, I would choose over any of these guys? That's a no. And actually, now that I say that, I think I'll move Emery back up to the top, or not to the top, but like back to up to elite manager. I think if I'm putting these guys in because they can raise the floor, I think Emery deserves to be in that same category as these guys as well. I don't think he sits on the same level as the Xavi in terms of whether I would take him over Xavi as United manager. And last, I have Zidane. And Zidane is going to go interested but. I think there's this perception of Zidane that he's an elite perfect manager for United and we would be so lucky to have him. And he's a great manager, but I'm really concerned about a lot of things in his career. Number one, he has 4 years, I think, of elite managerial experience. He's only ever done it at Madrid. 3 of those years were with Cristiano Ronaldo. And that elite super team where, you were seeing graphics of their B team and C team being maybe strong enough to compete in La Liga that season as well, let alone their first team. Winning 3 Champions League back to back to back is really impressive, but there's a lot of question marks about him. We've never seen him do it at a less good club, like a club where he needs to rebuild. We've never seen him do it with low quality players. I don't think we've seen him be a good tactician. I don't think we've seen him build a project. With Madrid, it was more like instant success with a really high quality team that he was inheriting. I think we've never seen him work with a board where he maybe doesn't have as much power as he wants. He definitely seems like someone who would want a lot of power. I'm not sure how that would go down with Wilcox. So ultimately, there's so many question marks I think I have with Zidane to the point where I think he's even closer to worth an interview than interested. But I think we need to have some respect for Zidane and the achievements he's had. I'd put him in interested but I just don't think he's the kind of manager who we need at United to build a project with. So that's the tier list. In terms of anyone who I want to change based on what I have now, or any order I want to change, I actually think this order is pretty good for put Ole above Emery, honestly. But that's just my take. If you guys want to, you think my Ole take is outrageous, and you want to hear more about why I love Solskjaer, you can check out my previous video, or I can even make a new video about it. But I put that as the order: Tuchel, Zerbi, Howe, Ole, Emery. I'm happy with my yes please order. And interested, but I would maybe put Xavi first, just because I have more hope that he could build a stronger long-term project. I'd put Amorim second. I'd put Ancelotti third. Ooh. Where do I put Conte here? I think Conte is above Ancelotti. I would put Conte in interested, but for me, Conte is really an interesting case because it depends on a lot of circumstance, right? If we don't qualify for Europe and that means we have a 20 million net spend, it's probably going here next to Zidane. If we have still don't qualify to Europe, but we have a 200 million net spend, we can genuinely challenge for the league that season. And I think with Conte, we have a chance of winning it. So he goes up here, or even here, even. But assuming what I predict in that we won't finish in Europe, we'll have a low budget and we'll need a huge rebuilding project, I'll put Conte over here next to Zidane. And then in worth an interview, I think Maresca, based on what he's done at Chelsea, probably deserves to be top. Pochettino, based on what he did at Spurs, probably deserves to be after him. I'd probably put Southgate last over here. And then lastly over here, in terms of how I would rate these guys, I think McKenna has the most potential to be successful. Ferrioli probably has the most potential to be successful out of any of them. The main issue is just that he's not Premier League proven. But I think if we had to get any of these guys, and these are my only options, I would actually go Ferrioli, because even though it went badly for Amorim, someone who was from the Portuguese league and came into this league, I at least think there's potential there. Whereas I don't think there's potential for a Glasner to do well, because we've already seen him in the Premier League, and we've seen him finish mid-table, and we've seen a style of play which I don't think is going to be successful for a team like United. Whereas with Ferrioli, it's more of an unknown. With Glasner, it's more like, I know, and I know he won't be successful. So I'll put Ferrioli, McKenna, I guess I'll put Iraola here because he has some pressing structures. I'll put Hürzeler. Actually, I don't know that much about Hürzeler, to be honest. I'll put Glasner here just because he won the trophy. I'll put Silva last because he got sacked by Everton. And imagine if we went from hiring a manager who was so successful at Everton and Moyes, it ended up being maybe our worst manager ever, and we made the full circle to just get a manager who got sacked by Everton. For me, I just can't accept that as a United fan. So I'll put him there. Between Fabregas, I think Fabregas probably has more tactical success than Carrick, so I put maybe like that. So that's the final list. My top 3 choices would be Enrique, Xavi, and Nagelsmann. Then in elite managers, we have these guys, and interested but these guys, worth an interview these guys, and would not hire these guys. And that's the final list. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. Like, share, subscribe. If you're interested in seeing any other tier list, maybe for a club like Real Madrid, for example, is something I was looking at doing, then you can feel free to let me know in the comments if that's what you want. But these are the managers who I would go for as terms of United manager. In terms of what is probably most realistic, I don't think he's coming. He's not coming. He's a maybe, especially because he worked with Vivell, if I understand correctly. He's a maybe. but I don't think it's likely. It's plausible more than these guys, but it's not likely. I think he's definitely likely. He's definitely likely. He's somewhat likely, maybe as likely as Nagelsmann. I mean, if we wanted to get him, we could just give him the job instantly, 100%. And with him, I think it's similar to a Howe maybe in terms of the likelihood he comes. So based on this, I guess realistically, the manager I would want is Tuchel. In terms of this ranking. So yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next video.